and welcome. Indeed, today is going to be more of an education. Just trying to understand all the nitty-gritty and the bureaucracy that goes on in there. But government indebtedness to BDC is causing a worry for the banks. Well, the banks have said that if government don't pay the BDCs, for the BDCs to pay them, they won't be able to guarantee the BDCs, and therefore fuel shortage, which we dread. But I just wanted to find out what's the whole system, how the whole system works, who is entitled to go and bring what, and who pays for what, and at what cost, and how come it is that, whatever it is that they bring, is sold. I mean, we pay for it. So who is not giving the money to who and what's happening? That's what we are going to find out. My name is Nana Ansakwa the Fourth, Akwomeduma Sahini, and also your host. When I come back, we're talking BDCs. No. Well, thank you very much for staying. And as I said, government indebtedness to BDCs is causing a worry for the banks. Now, with me in the studio is Sonyo Jose, who is the CEO for bulk oil distribution companies. So you understand what goes on in there. Joining us on the phone will be John Jenapor, Deputy Minister for Power. He also knows what's happening. We have inserts of Moses Osaga. So we'll hear that, and I'm sure by the time this hour is left, we would have broken down the mist of all this issue. Pastor, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Domini, I find all my first time guests.
And congratulations. I never had the privilege to.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've withdrawn your fine then. All first time guests are fine, you see. I'm Bantam, so I've withdrawn your fine.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with the current affairs, and then we'll go and then you explain to us how things work. Okay, basically the banks are worried that you guys are not paying them, and therefore they may not be able to guarantee, as you bring in purchases. As simple as I've just enumerated, but how does the system work?
Well, the industry is structured into different tiers, and everybody's role is pretty well defined. As BDCs, we are supposed to import products to augment refining output and also create a bulk exit for refineries. So if a refinery is in Ghana, like Tor is, and we have another one called Platon, I want to refine, they will have a bulk buyer to break bulk for them, and also provide an alternative source of product, which also enables them to become more competitive. All right, so you don't have somebody who becomes a monopoly because he's just a refinery in Ghana. So that's one of the things that we do. We sell to the oil marketing companies. So the oil marketing companies are the ones you're more used to, like a Total, a Shell, an Allied Oil, a Glory Oil, or something. I mean, those are the ones you are used to. Their job is to take from BDCs in bulk and then in a smaller form of bulk and break it down and retail it to users like yourselves. Yeah. In the entire chain, we are all regulated by the NPA. They are the regulators of it. They are supposed to make sure everything works pretty well. And we also have refineries who they actually process crude. They don't bring refined products. And when they refine their products, they could take a bulk exit, which could be the BDCs, or alternatively want to sell directly to OMCs in smaller lots, which can also create its own problems. Yeah. Then we also have another player, BOST. BOST has a mandate to operate strategic stocks and also to trade. So now it's currently trading, and also has storage facilities. We also have private people too who have storage facilities who keep the products that BDCs or other government companies may bring into town. We are all funded largely by the banks or by our suppliers as well. So the banks have a key role to play in the chain of things. They would probably underwrite our transactions. So if I'm buying from a supplier who may not be that comfortable with my direct credit risk, the bank would have to step in by issuing what we call letters of credit, which is more like an assurance that on due date, I would pay. And frankly, our local banks also don't have direct capacity to give foreign companies that much comfort. So what often happens is that a local bank will say, I would pay, and they have a relationship with, say, a foreign bank like a Citibank or a Standard Chartered in New York, and they will say, okay, I assure you to that this local bank who is assuring that BDC to will pay. You know, they create some financial comfort within their system.
Wow. Now, so if you don't get paid,
yeah.
Okay,
probably you really want to understand how the debt comes about.
Yeah.
All right, so we get the payment bit. I mean, we used to have a regime that was not, well, that used to be regulated by government. And there's a bit of a history, this whole deregulation thing. It started way back. And when we started business in Ghana, I mean, the foreigners and our colonial masters had a deregulated market. So everybody brought his own products. So there was no government intervention. Till somewhere in 1980, when government started controlling the markets by being a more dominant player. It had taken over GAIP, which is now Todd. It had taken over AGIP, which is now GOIL. So we started then. In 96, government realized that regulating the market too much was a burden on its fiscal situation, and it was creating an economic crisis. So we started deregulation in 96. Fast forward, 2015, we've operated that model where government sets prices through the MPA. So for me as a BDC then, my job was to supply the market at predetermined prices with government. So I and government have agreed that probably I'm supplying products at $200 for this window. It's an objective formula.
Okay.
So if I do it $200, that's what I do. It's government's responsibility to tell me how he wants me to sell it to you. My job is to make sure I get my $200 from government. So if government says I should sell it to you at $100, I'll sell it to you at $100. And I'll go from $100 from government. If government says I should sell it to you at $250, I'll sell it at $250 and go and give government its $250. I'm not entitled to anything more than the contract price, which is predetermined. So BDCs in time past, we never make more than we're entitled to, whether prices go up or they come down. We have a fixed term or a fixed a finite structure, you know. So that's what it's been. The debts have come across because government in time past was subsidizing or what we call under recoveries, or saying that, look, instead of you selling at 100, at 200, as per the contract we have with you, you do the 100, and government doesn't find, or bring the other 100. Government has had challenges over time with managing that other 100, and that's also necessitated us to knock off that regime and have a liberalized regime, so the markets will determine the prices, and government too would be free from that fiscal burden, which honestly, at some stage, never made sense.
We have an insert of Moses Asaga. Let's hear what his take is.
Well, in terms of dollar terms, government owed almost about $900 million on account of forex loss.
Okay.
And this was because of the subsidies in those periods, 2011 to almost 2013, 2014, when crude prices were very high. Government was subsidizing on the forex because we're not using the forward rate, but we're using the spot rate. So at the time that LCs are supposed to mature after 90 days, the exchange rate would have moved, and that is what accumulated the forex loss. So government in 2013, 2014 took a bold step to start paying this forex loss. And to my mind, government paid approximately $400 million to the BDC between the period 2014 and then 2015. So government, as I said, really haven't just sat back, but with the intervention of the Minister of Finance, directed by the President, and with the Minister for Petroleum, these payments were made to the BDC, and the NPA, who were the technical advisors on it. Now there is a portion which is about $530 million, which is yet to be paid. And I'll call that one the phase 2 payment. And in this phase 2 payment of about $530 million, as at last year, September, what we are doing now is we have commissioned Ernst & Young to do the auditing and to validate the figures that MPA has given to the Minister of Finance. Once the validation is completed by Ernst & Young, then the Ministry of Finance and the Bank of Ghana would then collaborate to see the kind of instruments that they would use to do those payments. So the process is ongoing.
What timelines are we looking at?
Yes, just as we started to look at the proper forex laws, the BDCs are also talking of an interest loss, which means that for the period that government is holding back their money, the banks are charging them interest on those facilities. So again, the Seaboard, have sent a request to the National Petroleum Authority to also come out with what are the figures that are accrued as far as interest is concerned. But that one is a very tough job because the reconciliation in it is quite enormous. You can imagine MPA having to deal with all these multiple banks, deal with BDCs. So just about 3 days ago, the MPA has come out with provisional figures in terms of interest approval, and we have asked Ernst & Young to come and validate them. So it is because of this second request that probably is delaying the payment. But discussions have always been ongoing between Seaboard, Bank of Ghana governor, at least the outgoing governor, the National Petroleum Authority, Ministry of Finance, and Ministry of Petroleum.
So you can't give us some timelines as to, in your opinion, when you think this debt will be over and done with, it will be history?
Yes, it will be history if Ernst & Young comes out with their final validation of the interest, so that we would add all together and know the total sum. Once we know the total sum, the Bank of Ghana and the Ministry of Finance would know how to structure the payment and what kind of instruments to use. And there have been a few ideas that is floating.
Can you categorically state that by the end of this year, the debt to the BDCs will be no more?
Well, I can say that by the end of this year, a substantial amount of it would have been paid.
Well, so that was voices from the NPA. Let me welcome Patrick Stevenson. Patrick, you're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Patrick's here as a banker, so he's going to speak from the distress that the banks are going through with regards to delayed payment. And I want to find out, how does the interest get calculated, and if the debt ever gets paid, do they have to pay it with the interest as well?
Well, like every other facility that we provide to, not just the BDCs, but every other creditor, debtor, as it were, to the banking industry. If you default over a certain period of time, of course, there are certain clauses within these contractual agreements.
The reason I'm asking that is, are they borrowing at the usual 30, 40, all these ridiculous rates, or because of the size, they're doing the normal 2 to 5%?
It would depend on terms of engagement. You can't have the same cost of. It would depend on the terms of engagement for the LC. It may not be the same across all the players that you have within the industry, for example. So, it all depends on the relationship that the BDC will have with the respective bank and the terms of engagement, even between the supplier of the product and the
banks will normally loan dollars out at between 12 and tops 15%, and CD between 26 and 30%. So if this guy brings a ship load of oil and he's coming to get guarantee, is that the same rate that the banks would do, or because of the amount involved, there's some?
No, it wouldn't work directly that way. I mean, if it's a foreign currency, of course, you have to you have to consider the FX changes as well. So you wouldn't have the same rates like you would have for a domestic security that is issued, which you usually find around 33% plus, which you have between various banks and players. So in absolute terms, I mean, the rates will not be 30. Like I say, I mean, it would depend on the contractual agreement that exists between a particular BDC and then the financial institution that is providing that. But I mean, at the end of the day, if there's a default on the facility, in this case, it appears the default is the BDCs, but transient some other point, which has to be governed because the government is not honoring. I'm sure Mr. Husi has done justice to that subsidy section or that under recoveries that existed in the market for some time is not honoring that obligation. I mean, as a bank, you're concerned about having access to that money because it's somebody else's deposits that you'd have collected to be able to turn around. And so there are costs with that decision. And so if we are charging the BDCs that cost, I mean, it makes every sense that whoever has that liability. But it also depends on the contractual agreements between the BDCs and then government as a whole concerning the pricing regime and all of that.
Well, let me take a break here and come back. And, by all means, government is going to pay, right? By all means, government is going to pay. Does it help in any way? Stay tuned, we're coming back. Well, thank you very much for staying whilst we're trying to demystify the mist that surrounds the whole BDC protocol. But, Senor, you bring this, it's government that's bought it. I mean, they haven't paid today, they haven't paid tomorrow, but even if the government moves and the next one comes, you're going to get paid.
We'll be dead before the next one comes. So that, the problem, the BDC problem is no more a shortage problem because there's a lot of stock in town. Government has put in some interventions to help curb the risk that is associated with the BDC default. So some more BDCs have been licensed. Government itself, the boss itself is now trading. No more strategic stock stuff, so it's trading actively. Some BDCs are still trying to find their way around. So there's stock in town. I don't think this is really going to cause a shortage problem. The real problem you have with this is the risk it poses to the entire financial system. All right, and that's where the banks have a big problem. I'm not surprised they've had to now really let it out because sooner than later, one bank or the other would have to sink. And it would be worse than having a DKM. And you have an interbank market which is quite active. So when one bank goes, it has a rippling effect within the entire financial system. I heard yesterday on your station that one of the bank MDs had indicated that BDC's indebtedness was over 3 billion. And that's a lot of money. 3 billion cedis is way more than the total capitalization of all the banks in Ghana. Of most of the banks that are involved in the petroleum business. If you put them together, just think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4 banks could go down. Because these debts are not debts that are coming or funded by a BDC's equity. They are largely bank funded. The margins on this business are very minimal. And in the last few years, most of them have eroded. The interest charge, just for the record, is not really for all the debt. The debt is classified in 2 lots. One of them is what we call the forex under recovery, and there's the other one is the price under recovery. Nobody is demanding FX right now on the forex under recovery. The one that we're demanding interest on is actually on the price under recovery. And this is against policy that was passed somewhere in 2014. It was passed so as to give banks the confidence to still fund us. Because the banks realized the BDC didn't have the money. So if you keep subsidizing and you are not paying the subsidy, and you don't have a policy to pay at least interest on the CD component of the debt, where is the BDC going to get the money? Then the dollar component of the debt, we came to some understanding that we needed to meet government halfway. So we were waiving that right, tangent on certain other things. So that's not being claimed for now. the exposure is real. And if this entire thing is treated as just a BDC and a stock matter, we may just miss the entire plot. We'll wake up one morning and the economy will just be shaking left,
But
right,
is there a confusion as to what the balance left? 400 million has been paid. There's 530 left, but Ernst & Young has to come in.
Yeah, definitely. It's Ernst & Young. But what Ernst & Young is doing is auditing, verifying the claims, which is very necessary. The total claims put together will be about 2.7 billion. So that still tells you that there's still some debt that BDCs will have to carry on their own, which will just be a function of their regular trade. Because when the BDC sells to, say, Shell, to a Goil, we don't take cash. All right, we give them some credit. They take a while. They may sell to you cash, but they sell to you cash over a period. And over a period, they also get to pay us. So a part of the money is also a function of the funding for stock. Okay, but you have about 2.7 billion that BDCs are claiming. I don't think as a responsible government, you just get up and just pay 2.7 billion because somebody is claiming it. And even if it makes sense and it's legit per structure and all that, it has to be properly verified. And I think that I absolutely support what the ministry is doing and the NPA is doing to ensure every single claim is properly verified, validated, and payment made. Sometimes in the process, you may realize that government as it may not necessarily be the one solely responsible for the debt. Some of the claims and the computations may have errors which may be a result of a BDC's function or a bank's misreporting or error in reporting. And these things would have to be sorted out through the audit. So Ghanaians are made to pay through the taxpayer the real costs of the debt. So this problem, in summary, is not a shortage problem, in my opinion.
No.
I think it's really an economic problem, as in the entire economy and the sustainability of the entire financial system. Most of the banks have not really provisioned for what they have to provision. It's being deferred. Maybe we have another June or October to close it out. But beyond that, FIRS, which is the current international accounting standard that is used, will not allow most of them to. And most of them will have to file.
I mean,
or recapitalize. They have to go bust or something. That's why it's a problem.
Stephen, Patrick, the question is, I mean, 3 billion, which is, as Senior is saying, bigger than most banks put together, the capital in terms. So why do you keep lending? Is it that the assurance that one day it will happen? I mean, why would the bank keep lending?
I mean, first of all,
let me just. The banks are really not lending now.
They are
not really. Like I said, we get funded. Two different ways to get funded. Either you get funded by the bank or you get funded by a supplier.
Yeah.
So most of the stocks you have in country now are stocks funded by suppliers.
Okay.
And sooner than later, when they also start feeling the heat, they will also realize that they can also keep funding the situation. But the banks are trying, but very limited. I mean, there's a credit squeeze. But we don't feel it too much.
But is there any under recovery now?
No. Well, you have it on just a few products. Someone like you may be very interested in the premix matter. So premix, premix is still subsidized. Okay. You have some products we call social products. Okay. And then we have something we call marine gas oil and RFO, residual fuel oil. It's used mostly by industries for boilers and all that. But funding that, I don't think is a problem. Government has put in a mechanism to fund those debts as and when they are created. So then the main problem is no more there. I asked that so the suppliers will be secure because from now going forward, it will just be the historical. So we now call it a legacy debt. We largely call it a legacy debt. Now, so I mean, how long can the banks hang on before Ernst & Young, approve the debts and then everybody gets theirs? But it's only 530. There's more. I mean, that would pretty much clear it. Okay, what 530 used to be our estimate before the claims were formally made. The claim made for the foreign exchange under recovery, meaning the shortfall only as a result of the exchange bit, currently is about $567 million. Then there's also what we call the price under recovery. That is, have to probably take another minute to break everything down. Quite complicated. I bring in cargo, let's say it's $10 per liter, and $10, because I have a contract price of $10. The exchange rate is not set by myself. No. It's set by government for for you to pay. My job is to get my $10, and government has a responsibility of providing me the $10.
Okay.
By the time that is brought, government realizes that probably the dollar may be 3.0 at the time that he has to make sure I get the money when I exit the transaction. But they still assume a rate of 2.5, hoping that rates will necessarily fall. So I have a 250 CDs, 25 CDs price to sell, right? But that 25 CD is now what we call the ex-refinery call price. Government still looks at this and says that no, these 25 CDs, people cannot pay. Take it down by another 2. So let's sell it at 23. Bear in mind, instead of actually using a 3.0, we use a 2.5.
And now you dropped it
further. So the first leg is the foreign exchange under recovery, moving from 3.0 to 2.5. All right, that's the first leg. So you will never be able to get when you get 250 CDs, you can't get $10 by going back to the central bank to buy the dollar. You get something less. So that shortfall will create a foreign exchange under recovery. That's at the 25 level. But even at the 25, government now is saying that look, reduce the thing further by 2 CDs and sell it at 23. That 2 CDs further reduction is what we call the price under recovery. So the price under recovery is what may be more popular, and that's the only thing we claim an interest for.
Okay.
The first leg, there's no interest claim on it. It's the second leg that has an interest claim, and that is also in excess of 400 million, because we've been carrying these debts significantly since 2011. So you can imagine what impact it has had on business and also the bank's liquidity. But there's good news though.
This 530, which one is it?
It's actually 567. That's a claim. After the audit, it may reduce. All right.
But which is it?
That's the foreign exchange
shortfall. So there's the
price
recovery shortfall yet to come.
So government has paid significantly that without paying the interest that has accrued since 2011 on that, which today will stand at 400 and something million, maybe 460 or so million CDs. And then for the outstanding core principal, you know, if it was the bank they claim the interest before they claim the principal.
Before you take the principal.
With government, they pay the principal before they discuss the interest. So let's treat it the government way. Government will just have about 46 million CDs on the principal for the price under recovery outstanding. I mean, box everything up, the estimates are about 2.7. After the audit, I think it's likely going to be a bit lower. All right, because a few things are coming up. Some of the errors are not a function of government's policy, but maybe a bank failing to make a claim at the right time. So there has to be some apportioning of blame. You know, the BDC can't bring everything to government. Some of it were not a result of government, it was a result of a bank probably not following a certain process in time, and that's where we may have issues.
I see. Patrick, how real is this for the bank? I mean, will they sail through, or a couple of banks may fall foul?
Well, I mean, that would depend on whether or not the money is going to be paid. I mean, we know the money will be paid, but as we speak, if you look at the performance of virtually all the banks, I mean, the banking industry as a whole, we have all been struggling, particularly 2015. I mean, and non-performing loan ratios have been going through the roof. And so, I mean, it is a challenge for the banks, really. And given that this is a debt that is owned, but that is predominantly government owned, it even makes it a lot more challenging. I mean, if it's private sector, then you know that you can get into some other strategies for recovery, for example. I mean, if I had given, say, multimedia this facility to be able to do business, then, I mean, there are certain things that I can lay claims on, that if we have a very good environment, that we can liquidate these and be able to recover whatever proceeds we need to, we can do that. But it's not the same for the BDCs. I mean, as you can appreciate, the issue is a little complex, and so it is challenging for the banks as we speak today. Margins for our business is equally shrinking, so difficult times for us if this is not paid and is not paid on time.
You can survive till the end of the year?
Well, I mean,
no, but there's good news. You know, it's not like government is really sleeping over this. Honestly, government realizes the enormity of this matter. I mean, some banks should really not exist today, really. But for some waivers, they call forbearance, and it's not that reprieve is not forever. So government, the vice president has led the charge together with the finance minister to try and come up with a solution for this. And the efforts to leverage on the energy sector levies that were passed in January, those taxes that were passed, to issue long-term bonds that can help cover and insulate the banks from that crisis. So hopefully an SPV is going to be set up. Government will commit a part of those taxes to pay this debt. The SPV will now assume the liability of the banks, of the BDCs, and then issue bonds to convert the bad asset into a good asset. That will also make the bank still viable, all right, and still operable. So I think that effort is there. As I speak tomorrow morning, there'll be there's a key meeting that involves everybody. The governor has been on this because it is his industry, and he wants this fixed as quick as possible. The finance minister and the fund, the IMF, everybody wants to get this thing sorted out once and for all. So there's good news to try and cover the challenges that the banks have. And I'd urge the banks to be a bit patient with the system. You have to be a bit patient. I mean, there's been goodwill shown so far. The effort from government, the president, everybody has been quite positive. We just need to go through the process to get things resolved. Hopefully, I think the third quarter of this year shouldn't have that problem sitting on the banks.
But Senor, you recognize that, I mean, these commitments, we've heard them time and again. I mean, it only appears that now we have put strategies to them.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, you're aware, one of the good things to do is that the banks have also been the forefront of the solution. Well, all right, we worked with the banks to try and come up with a solution, and government has not been sleeping over it. We all hope that the first quarter would have been done, so when you filed your accounts, you'd have been able to cover yourself pretty well. But that wasn't possible. And government has had so much on this plate, I have to be honest. I've not had a day where I've had to meet these guys and they've not been willing to. But the process, you know, it's a step-by-step thing. The audit, for instance, would complete somewhere in June. You know, so it becomes a bit dicey how government can start issuing payments when the audit is not fully complete. If I pay you and probably the audit shows you were due a bit less, if we issue bonds to you, what happens? You now go to another process of review before anybody is accused for causing financial loss, you know, and all that. But I have to be honest, even today, I had a privilege of meeting the vice president and the acting president today, and he's been working at it. The finance minister has spoken to me a number of times this week. That cooperation is there. I mean, I don't think that we should lose faith in the financial system because of this real risk. The only thing too also is that we shouldn't also just take it for granted, but that risk is not abstract. It is very, very real. Yeah. Some banks have already started laying off staff.
Wow. But see, I'm sure if I were to open the phone today, just now, the first question is that we've been paying toll debt for God knows how long, but this debt can never clear. Senor, explain to us, where does the toll debt go and what is it for? And is it not for all these shortfalls in the system?
Okay, so the toll debt is different from the issues with BDC. So we have to discuss toll. And I honestly believe the issue of toll has to be looked at very objectively. You know, and we all have to stop the politics around toll and the politics around petroleum. When the NPP government took over, if I'm not mistaken, my memory serves me right, they met a toll debt of about 400 million or so. And they said, they went to market with it. The next thing, we had a toll debt recovery levy. We were supposed to wipe everything. We had a toll that was functioning. Everybody was saying toll was back, making profits and all that story. When NDC assumed office in 2009, we realized that the toll debt had increased from 400 to 900 million. Meanwhile, we've been paying toll debt all this while. Today, the toll debt is in excess of 2 billion. All right. So the question
the more we pay, the more it grows.
No, you see, you know, so we need to get a bit objective about it. What is the toll debt? What is the cost of the debt? Are they subsidies? Which part is subsidies? Which part is operational losses? In my opinion, I think there are possibly a lot of operational losses also in there. But that's a limited liability company. Do we need to keep taxing the people to pay for operational losses of a limited liability company, whether it's a state or not. It has a responsibility to operate competitively, and we can't just keep subsidizing you, in quote. Let's ring fence that story, all right, and see which part is subsidy, account for it, because we collected quite some amount of TOR debt, but the debt seems to keep growing. So there's an objective discussion that has to be had about it. If TOR needs massive retooling, let's make the right investment, ring fence the debt, put it aside, and come up with a solution to deal with it. If TOR is not a viable operation, let's stop making politics about it. Let's know that this thing, the more it operates, the more the debt we have. And let's have a way to come to some conclusion to it. Do we get private sector to take over the place so government will not have the responsibility of creating more taxes to carry on one kind of public debt? So you can find some finite position to the TOR debt situation. That is what I think should happen. We should have an objective discourse about it. The MPP and NDC have all played politics with TOR, and that should end. It is a business. It must operate functionally, viably, as every business.
But then there's a cartel, which it is believed or presumed that they need the TOR reservoirs, and therefore, if TOR is not working, it works better for, if I was a BDC, I come and dump my stuff into their reservoirs rather than TOR, refining and using it. So it wasn't in the interest of a certain cartel to get it working.
That's also not true. The TOR facilities have mainly been dominated by BOST today. And for a good while, the TOR facility was not even being used by the private sector at some stage. And the country never had shortages. So that's not a problem. TOR is a business. And for me, I've always maintained governments are not great at doing business. And it's very simple. The operating philosophy of a business is more profit-driven, efficiency-driven. And probably look at other things like brands and all that. And when you deal with government doing business, it has more political and social interest than commercial interest. So every board that changes with every single government, every CEO, the objectives are different. I don't mind making losses if I'm meeting my social objectives. At the end of the day, the taxpayer will end up one day being taxed to pay. Is that a viable system? Is that a viable way of running business? No. And TOR has not grown since 1961. TOR should have been dominating refineries across West Africa by now. We've been operating TOR since 1961. But TOR, I think, has been in the situation in which it is because of government. All politicians, everybody has his own political objective when he or she is managing TOR. If TOR has to be privatized, we should have an honest discussion about that. We all know what has happened to Vodafone when PNT turned to Vodafone. If it has to change, it has to change. If the business model, the capacity is not operationally viable, let's be honest about it. Let's not just take excitement the fact that the system is just working. There was a time during the MPP time, everybody gave them praise for TOR working
for
and
turning on the turbines.
Man, everybody. Right? But what happened when they exited at the time? What did we see? 500 million loss. Then they increased the TOR debt recovery for us. It can't continue that way. Government can find other ways to manage, in quote, any form of cartel, and it is doing that effectively. You have BOST, you have GOIL, which runs 20% of the market. You can't fix anything. And Nana, the way this market is, it's too competitive to want to entertain the idea of cartelization. Everybody is too greedy to want to spare his volume to you. Everybody expects that he can sell cheaper by buying cheaper if he has higher volumes. Why would I cartelize with you when I know driving my volume to be having lower prices? The petrol is the same everywhere.
0560 800 000. 0560 800 000. This one says, Nana, good evening to you and your guest. I cannot comprehend why government owes every single creature on this planet. Apart from our huge debt to the donors, government owes teachers, nurses, judicial staff, Nigerian gas, lecturers, NHI, school feeding, ECG, BDC, etc. God should save this country from what's going on. This is Safo Kantanka in Kasua. Send your messages in and I would catch up with you for you. But, Mr. Banker, I thought this was a multi-million industry where anytime you hear of
multi-million losses.
Anytime you have countries or institutions or companies that deal in oil, it's just money. It's not, collapsing. So what's happening?
No, I think it's been the structure that we have deployed right from when we started this whole petroleum and crude oil business. I mean, from the days of refinery. I mean, we had a certain state-led intervention. I mean, Senor has touched on virtually all the pointers, but if you should even look at the issues surrounding toll, for example, and when these levies were being instituted and when we were told, we are going to defray all of these liabilities, at a point, I remember, the debt of toll virtually nearly collapsed one of the banks.
GCB.
Ghana Commercial Bank. This should be close to between 8-10 years ago.
Yeah.
It almost collapsed Ghana Commercial Bank.
Well, in 2009, it was really practically gone.
It's until the
Commercial Bank was really
it was almost
the
gone.
government was trying to find a way to keep it afloat.
Today they've gone through some rebranding and restructuring, and we hope those things are not happening again. But the point is that some of us would have expected that when we kept increasing these levies in the course of trying to make the sector viable or make the operations of toll viable and make the financial system, ring-fence the financial system from these challenges, we thought that, okay, so you let us know the total debt stock of toll, for example, and explain that over this number of years, we are charging this as an additional levy.
So you see where you end.
So we know that by this date, we should stop collecting the levy. I mean, we can't keep charging levies in perpetuity for an institution whose debt we know. It doesn't make any sense. And the same way in 2016, 2015 November, when we were discussing the budget and all those adjustments were being made, it was the same question some of us who were operating in the space were asking. Okay, we have gone to change the nomenclature of some of these levies, metamorphose some of them, combine them in all kinds of ways. Fine, agreed. What is it that we owe? How much has been mobilized till today? How much of that debt is amortized? What is left? How much do we have to charge? Over what period so we clear that debt? We didn't have that debate in this country. Okay. So yes, it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is doing well in some countries. Today we are told the price decline has virtually hit lots of players in the industry. That is fine, but those that have made the right provisions have been somewhat insulated to some extent. But if you look at our own case, consistently it appears to be operational issues. The exogenous challenges are virtually there for everybody. I mean, they're systemic. Okay, it is our own operational issues that keep compounding these problems for us. And you don't only find it in the petroleum sector. If you go to cocoa, for example, I mean, you may find similar arrangements where some monies are sitting somewhere in financial industry. Again, we are struggling because being able to collect monies that have gone through the system, cocoa farmers have not collected what is due them. I mean, there's a whole conundrum that exists there as well. And so, yes, it may be a multi-billion-dollar industry because if you start looking at the balance sheet of some of the BDCs, for example, you see huge money sitting there. I'm not saying that
but it is money you see huge money. When you look at the bottom line and look at the liability, assets could look nice. You see 100 million, you're going to see liabilities of 150 million. So you have poor man working.
so you have these practical challenges that exist. So you may hear big numbers, but I think the operational issues, which for me a lot of it have been more legacy, and we're moving away from that. But I think as we move away, the right actors that need to make sure things work have not necessarily come to the party to make sure it happens as quickly as we expect, which is why these complications keep coming up. So we only hope that the current strategies we are pursuing will work. For those of us in the financial industry, I mean, it's a challenge. A couple of years ago, you would hear lots of analysts and people who watch the financial industry tell you that we were benefiting at the expense of virtually every other player in this economy. When the economy was suffering or struggling, well, the financial industry was doing well. Go look at the 2015 numbers. It doesn't look that good. And that is why some of these challenges are beginning to come up. So we just have to take a very good look at them.
So I think one of the questions I saw on here was that how come crude prices are the lowest on the market and we are, seem to be pricing us upwards? And I don't know, but everybody seems the BDCs have something to do with it.
No. Like I told you, even in the regulated regime, who does much comparatively profitable. We were not taking more than we were due. Now that there's competition, we can't take. When prices go up with crude, it has a certain impact on the refined market as well. It may not necessarily be proportionate. If crude prices go up 50%, it doesn't mean that go down 50%. Refined products may not necessarily go down 50%. It may be 30%, but often they move in a common direction by different rates. Then the next thing too is that when products land here, they are foreign currency indexed. You have to convert them into CD. What is the exchange rate? Is the exchange rate changing? If it is changing, it will have an impact on the price. Then you should ask again, what are the taxes and levies being put on it? And if the taxes are placed on it, you just get what you see. As a matter of fact, since we started deregulation, pump prices are much, much lower than would have been if they were regulated. If you look at the curve, while pump prices from the private sector is going down, what would have been regulated is going the other way. So it's a divergent thing. So we are better off under the deregulated pricing regime. And BDCs are not really making money, really. The competition is too much. And we are about 34. You can't get everybody together. Some of them are big. The small one will tell them, if you say we should sell at one price, are you saying that I also should become big? So nobody can agree to want to know. We are not a party to that. And the taxes too have become critical. When you look at the tax composition, it's largely dealing with the power and the BDC legacy debt problem.
Let me take a quick break here and kind of say that, are we taking advantage of this low pricing period, gathering as much as we can to pay the backlog as much as possible, so that one day when the prices come up and we have to cushion, we may not be left with too much debt? We're coming straight back. Well, thank you very much for staying. Let me remind you that the nation's heartbeat, the Ghana Premier League, shows every Saturday on your leading channel, Adum TV, for all the cheers, jeers, tears, suspense, and thrills. Don't miss the Never Say Die Accra Hearts of Folk, the Fabulous Kumasi Asante Kotoko, the Mysterious Ebusia Drafts, Secondly Hazakas, and the new kids on the block, Midiama, Liberty Professionals, Brekum Chelsea, Techiman City, Wow All Stars, New Dubiase, and all the other Premier Giants on your favorite channel, Adum TV, every Saturday. It's Ghana Premier League, only on Adum TV. So all you football lovers, Saturday, just flick on to Adum TV and enjoy the Ghana Premier League. Don't miss that. But Senor, before maybe it's an unfair question to you, but since you are in there and you're rolling with the big boys, you may have gotten from the grapevine. Are we sort of making hay while the sun is shining?
The finance minister wanted to do something called a stabilization account, and the truth of the matter is, in a deregulated market, the only thing you can regulate as a policy person is the taxes. So what government is doing right now is to front load quite some taxes to help pay some of its key debts. And as time goes on, if prices are unbearable, the options that governments will likely have will be to lower the taxes, so it translates to the pump. But it means the government will now have to look for alternate sources to cover expenditures that it hoped it would have made on the back of the taxes. That's the only option government has. You know, some have raised the issue of trying to hedge a price and all that. What you can actually hedge is hedge the price to actually cover your tax revenue. All right, so you are always covered that you always get this amount, and maybe factor it again back into the price. So it's also the tax cost, the hedge cost is also paid for. That's an option, but I don't think that's really being done now.
What's the price you feel about 35 or?
Honestly, probably I don't know. Three. Brent, you mean?
Yeah.
Crude.
Yeah.
Crude is no. It should be. It's above 44. I've not followed the markets today,
okay.
so.
But I mean, we've had a good spell of low price, and I'm just realizing that I hope we have made because as a consumer, when I get to the pump, I don't benefit from this 44. You know, I'm still paying.
You are benefiting from the 44.
Well, no.
The only thing that 44.
There's too many taxes on it. So
if the 44 was 100 with all those taxes, you'd be paying more.
Well, they wouldn't have been able to put the taxes on it.
Well, maybe not. This is government. You know, government. Every time government has subsidized, it has always maintained its taxes. So BDCs were the ones who were carrying the under recovery. That's why there's a debate as to whether it's a subsidy or not. Because often subsidies are negative taxes. So if you're making taxes more than you're under recovering, you may not be able to call it a subsidy in economic sense.
So you guys were bearing the brunt.
We were funding that. All right. Now we can't fund that anymore. So the only two things, either the tax itself goes down, all right, and consumers will be made to pay close to the actual cost itself, as if there were no taxes, or government would have to pass it on to the consumer, because operators will not be able to undertake that, because when we do so, nobody's going to reimburse us. And even if you want to reimburse them, what will be the objective basis to even tell that the price that he's selling has factored in quote, the subsidy? You create room for private sector to also milk the system. So it's a dodgy thing. We all have to get real to the fact that petroleum prices would come at a minimum of cost. And if there are taxes, they will be charged. What policy should do, Nana, is to rather invest in systems that mitigate the impact of petroleum price fluctuations negatively. Transport, mass transport. What are we doing with mass transport? We spent over $2 billion in the last 4 years. Over that, maybe $3 billion in the last, or $2.5 billion in the last 4 years in trying to under-recover petroleum prices. That money could have revolutionized our transport system. And when you have 100% jump in prices, it will not necessarily translate into 100% jump in transport fares. Because fares will already be much lower. You have a train system, you have a mass transport. Even if you want to just subsidize just that sector, it won't be that much. So you who moves your V8 or something, you pay for your full price of petrol. But as it was, everybody who could have paid was being carried, you know, and that did not augur well for the public purse.
I'm scared. You haven't still answered my question though. Because as a customer, you see, when petrol prices or Brent prices were dropping and dropping and dropping, we thought that, we'll go to the pump and then we'll get all these drops. However, we were now going up and up.
No, it reflected.
There was some reflection.
Between the 1st of July and December, prices had dropped by about 25%. At that time, there were no taxes, new taxes introduced. But when taxes were introduced, a part of it was restored. And even when it was restored, it was still lower than prices before deregulation.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. I mean, you should you go on our website, cbodghana.com.
Yep.
One of the downloads you have there are some FAQs around the taxes, and you see the facts. That's what we went against. I mean, the chamber went against any effort to increase transport fares on the back of the taxes, because the transport fares were set in June the previous year, and at that time petroleum prices were higher than they were after the taxes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, we had an issue. If you want to argue something else, but don't argue petrol. You know that. So it didn't really. You know, this is what's it.
But are you
let me put my leg. Let me put my foot in the shoes of the finance minister. I don't think I'd have done any different. Maybe I'd have been a bit.
No, but what
I'll explain why. When prices dropped, the real people that I should be thinking of and worried about are the masses. All right, they form a bigger chunk of that, of the people who use transport. When you move your car, you move in a car alone. When they move a trotro, it carries about 20 people. That's an efficient use of fuel per liter. When prices were dropping, transporters would never drop their prices. Do you realize that?
No.
But there was an arrangement for prices to be changed once there's a change in petroleum prices by 10%.
Yep.
But prices went as far as 25%. So it means that there's a consumer surplus that is being kept by transport owners. If I'm government, I'm a policy person, and you are not being cooperative, the next move will be for me to take back that surplus and rather invest it in things that would affect the broader population. Because just transport owners in the country, we're now making the break at the expense of everybody. I won't factor you, I won't factor him. You drive your own cars. It's not a very efficient way of using fuel, just like I do. So we must bear the brunt. But the chunk of the people who I worry more about, we're never getting the benefit of the pump prices that had gone down. I'd rather tax the system and then take the surplus and invest it in things that will affect positively everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope you've understood what the system is a bit. I mean, I've been a little bit educated, and I'm sure you have been too. Senor, thank you. And thank you very much, my brother. I want to say thank you to Tantis, who makes my shirts for the show. You can get Tantis on 024 366 2001. 024 366 2001. Thank you for watching. Tomorrow we're back to do this all over again. Gentlemen, thank you very much.